I had heard around the neighborhood that kids had been ingesting a plant called Jimson weed, also known as Datura or angel trumpets. They spoke of cool visuals and strange thoughts. I had been told of a location where plants were growing, and decided to give it a try. Certain people who had experienced this plant warned against it, but after all the hype I wasn't going to miss out for anything. So my cousin Bob and I went to the spot and picked a grocery bag full of the prickly pods, which we had been told to open up and eat the seeds. After eating the seeds we became very sleepy, and our speech was quiet and strained. We felt extremely weak and couldn't stop yawning. We thought maybe we should walk around. We went to a nearby shopping mall, but quickly left because this plant rapidly started to consume us. Little did I realize that I was in for the ride of my life. Mind you, I am no stranger to hallucinogens, heroic doses, or bad trips. I kept thinking that I had a cigarette in my hand. I even felt it there, but when I went to hit it, it had disappeared. I was having conversations with people who were not even there. It was like being absolutely asleep, dreaming, but walking around and talking. We hooked up with a sober babysitter, and he brought us to a pool hall nearby. What a disaster. Let me remind you that you have no real grip on the reality around you. You might get busted doing something outrageous and come back into reality for a moment, panic, and slide right back into the spirit world. Anyway, while at the pool hall I managed to chew on a piece of chalk, and take balls off the table in the middle of a game, walk across the room for some reason, and hide them behind a cigarette machine. My babysitter, Joe, realizing that we were far more intoxicated than he had expected, escorted us out of the pool hall before danger of the law became a reality. Everybody in there was laughing at us. Joe said that we just looked really serious and confused. Actually, Joe should probably be the one writing this. For about 10 hours I can hardly remember anything. His story is far more detailed. Look kiddies, this plant is no joke. I don't think it would be going too far to call it extremely dangerous. At least when you're hallucinating off of acid or shrooms you can usually tell that you're hallucinating. On Datura you're fucking delirious. I didn't really have a bad experience, but I wouldn't even think about doing it again. It's more fun for a sober friend to watch. I'm telling you, you have absolutely no idea what's going on. This is the shit that will have you jumping out the window. Peace. Came back into town from college. There was a drought with pot. At a party my local friends said they'd found something just like pot, only it was a tea. We drank a glass each. I wasn't told the tea was much stronger than what had been used in the past. One of the things I recall, until waking up on a country road with the car out of gas, was driving a friend home. According to him we actually drove into Tulsa. He was holding the steering wheel while I shifted and braked okay, to play foosball. I have no memory of that. I just remember dropping him off and heading to my folks' house. The next thing I recall was waking up on a country road, and the trees were talking to me. It was a conspiracy. The trees were out to get us. I made sure a pocket knife was in my hand and started walking. After about a half hour someone stopped and picked me up. The local sheriff, in his own car, having come from church. We had a talk while he explained why my car was towed. I'd left the radio on full volume, and why he thought I was really high, the tree conspiracy thing. However, there was nothing illegal that he could find. After my folks came down to the police station and paid the $75 to get my car out of impound, I drove my VW Bug to my folks' place, went to my old room and slept for nearly 24 hours. I remember telling my folks that I'd done nothing illegal. They decided that someone slipped something into a beer I'd drunk. Other people also wound up in trouble that night. One guy decided that the road was actually a gravel path leading through a steel gate into a field. Really messed up his car. He didn't get hurt. Car totaled though. Another person hit a mailbox, overcorrected, hit a mailbox on the other side of the road, overcorrected, hit yet another mailbox, and so on for a rural mile, pretty much ruining his van. Yet another had to take a leak. He picked a house, knocked on the door, and asked to use the bathroom. When the 80-year-old grandma slammed the door in his face, he urinated on it. She called the cops, and he wound up in jail for indecent exposure. There are good legal herbals. Stay away from Jimson weed, also known as loco weed, or Johnson grass. Datura beetle smoked. Well, I have had a couple of Datura beetle plants for a little while now. One is the type popularly known as double black currant swirl and the other one is a cream-colored variety. They have shed their oldest largest leaves with age. Now, I am a very down-to-earth person, but I am spiritually and inebriately aware. Or in other words, I am very aware in general. The reason I am saying this is because, well, first of all, many people consider Datura as a spiritual medium, and the other is that I have only picked up a few leaves now, looked at them, smelled them and basically touched them to feel how dry they are and estimate weight and whatnot. Then I have placed them back and hung on the internet for a while reading upon different things regarding Datura. My posture has been that of me leaning my chin in my hands, rubbing my beard and occasionally coming into contact with my mouth. After a while I started feeling some slight, but very noticeable, alteration in my reality. It's hard to describe, probably due to its soft nature, but I definitely feel it, as if some sort of soft enhancement and alteration of clarity and focus. The other thing is that I feel increased awareness the areas my hands have been in contact with my face. Sort of the same way as one would feel after eating something slightly greasy and coming in contact with their face and feeling that slight need or urge to wash your face, those areas, because you have gotten something on it. Is anybody understanding this? I'm not saying this has a spiritual cause or the plant leaves have enormously powerful alkaloids which work upon skin contact. Or what is what. I'm just as objectively as I feel comfortable to, trying to tell what I'm experiencing. And so anyway, I allowed my cat to smell the leaves. Cats have an extremely well-developed sophisticated nose. Anything a cat willingly and curiously tries to eat is definitely harmless, in other words, and reacted curious at first, but after a few more whiffs clearly showed lack of interest. 10:44. Well, okay. I am planning to smoke my leaves carefully dose-wise, and since I don't have tobacco or anything to stretch this into a joint with, all I have is a wooden pipe which a lot of pure hash has been smoked through during its lifetime. As we all know, hash oils easily cover the insides of the pipe, so I'm giving an effort into smoking and burning away all of the hash smoke without inhaling it, blowing it out as fast as I can in my effort to cleaning my pipe without getting stoned of the oils. The point being not mixing THC and Datura's alkaloids to get a clear understanding of how smoked Datura metal is in effect. 10:46. Effort successful. I don't feel stoned, I still feel what I suspect to be the alkaloids from the leaf which I have gotten on my face with my fingers slightly and nothing else. Not even the coffee earlier on this morning. The leaf I have is beautifully dried, still being green and being slightly elastic though crisp dry at the same time. It weighs 0.36 grams in its dried state. I cut from it 0.05 grams which I am deciding to start off smoking. The set and setting is, well, I am starting to feel slight nervous about trying something new and so infamous, but I'm at ease having some knowledge of that the worst/most powerful possible method of ingestion is by tea. I'm listening to soft The Doors music. Probably gonna put on the end now. I'm sitting very comfortably in my comfortable apartment this beautiful morning and I guess about as ready as I can be. 10:55. 0.05 grams are placed in pipe. And one puff is taken and I'm holding it in as I'm writing this. Keep holding it in. Blew it out now. Held it in a good time and the smoke was slightly harsh. Blew it out and it tasted sweet. Whoa. Definitely feeling something. I have to concentrate on the effects a bit. 10:58. Okay, what can I say? I'm definitely on the effects. Kind of like equal to that strength inebriation which is perfect on cannabis for studying or being in class, or that level where you are definitely high but able to be high around people who you wouldn't want to be aware of it. It's very pleasant, not very euphoric, but it has that nice stony twist. For my sake, this far better than cannabis. In its own way. Peripheral alteration. Slightly purplish twist to what I'm seeing. No paranoia, which is nice for a change. Okay, let's try more. 11:08. Now I have emptied the pipe from its remaining content of the first fill. The first effects appear physically like a few soft punches to the stomach, but that could be for a variety of different reasons. Slightly more euphoric now. All I can think saying is that if opiates would be more like cannabis products, this is what it would be like. That enjoyable contemptive moment is there. Nothing much to find here. I could probably also say I would definitely recommend this dose. Feeling mostly distanced from the world around me like any drug does basically, just in its own more natural, like cannabis and opium, way. Something about the color purple, it stands out like nothing else and everything has a spotted purplish twist to it. Now let me see what more does. By the way, this is feeling slightly scary, not the high right now, but what more might do. Crossing my fingers for no delirium. 11:20. Smaller hit than my first one from a pipe with new 0.05 grams. Love the taste. Putting on some Happy Grateful Dead music. I need that positivity for the courage. That helped a lot actually. The eeriness of silence is gone and sort of like while tripping on psychedelics, the result of shift from silence positive music did a lot. Still feeling good. Hee hee. 11:25. I'm pretty far gone now actually, to be honest. I can do things and I could be social, I could work. But mentally I'm actually far gone, and I would be very careful in social settings, which I usually am on new drugs. On some drugs that social thing just doesn't work. But on this, it could. Oh yeah, and my balance is slightly, euphorically, shifted in some strange and slight way. This is different than virtually any other drug, the same way cannabis is. That same nice head high which only cannabis was famous for now also goes for Datura, for my sake. That same colorful mind/head high comfortable in your own world thing is going on. 11:30. Wow. I made myself ready to take another hit. To clear the rest of the bowl when suddenly a sensation hit me. I can't explain it. I'm starting to feel the beginning of feeling fucked up in a new way. Previously I just stepped in the boat. Now I'm just untying the ropes slightly and feeling the beginning of somewhere else. I'm very trancy. Staring into thin space for minutes, just gone in total trance of some kind. Pleasurably medium euphoric now. It has its trippy psychedelic physical sensations, such as a feeling of my energy field being pulled in random stretches. I can't even imagine what the complete hard inebriation of this could be. What it would be like to be totally gone in this world. 11:36. Smoked some more of the second bowl, and I saw that a little piece fell out, so I still haven't smoked all of the second filling of 0.05 grams, and got my first visual/illusionary flash of some kind. That sort of freaked me out, like whoa, peripheral things are happening. I don't want to go down that delusionary path today. Really don't want that. So I started dancing, to Casey Jones, in my living room to raise spirit and dispel the slight fear, and boy did it disappear. I could only see how fun this would be for a raver along with a couple of beers and some good friends. Not as the center of all attention and all fun, but as with cocaine as a pretty cool background state of mind. Every new puff lets me feel scared for a new few seconds until I do something about it, and then it completely disappears. It seems like every state of mind I am is very controllable and easily enhanced, like diving into fun or feel-good states of mind, switching between the two, and very enjoyable. The energy field pulls are kind of nice feeling. It's starting to feel sort of sexy in a good sexy stoned way. This is far better for the same equivalent situation like that of smoking weed and enjoying a scenery or some view or something. This is very nice in some subtle way, at the same time not subtle at all. It's like you're very much in this Datura world but not dramatically at all. Like with opium. You can be very much in the opiated state of mind at a nice dose, but it's not dramatic. Whereas cannabis is more dramatic. Hee hee. Okay, I'll smoke more, till I have smoked 0.10 grams, then lie down, fool around. Do stuff and come back and see if I want to do any more at all. 13:20. Well, it's 13:20 and I have basically smoked 0.15 grams in total up to this point. I have spent some time on my bed looking out the window at a rainy beautiful view in total blissful contempt. I like rainy days though, I'm an autumn sort of a guy, and from Bergen, so that fits nice. I have smoked 0.05 more. There is about half of the leaf left. I haven't timed anything or thought about anything too much, just smoked according to what I felt like and have smoked euphorically, chasing that nice euphoric state mindlessly but carefully. It's kind of like cannabis. Duration-wise and how long the peak effects are after each toke. Though in total I think it wears off slower, but more clearly. Other than that, I have been reading Datura rapports of all kinds and never has time gone by reading so enjoyably. I fall deeper into the subconscious visual world of imagination while reading something, but much more focused at the same time. No distracting thoughts as is usual with me. This stuff is totally in the moment. Being the key factor to its palatability. Dose-wise you really don't have to smoke much. Well, I get easily high off of hash and weed. But I think I feel Datura a little bit more on less amounts. But then we're being very picky on analysis because we're talking about a difference of milligrams and comparing two comparable drugs which at the same time are different. They would fit nice with one another though. I feel as though I have grown accustomed to the high. I could counteract with people and know where I stand socially from the inebriation. I feel safe in knowing how this works, how long it lasts, and I will try smoking a bit more. 13:35. I filled up 0.10 grams in my pipe and will see how much I smoke myself through. Key thing is I'll smoke a bit more daringly now, but still with a hint of caution. 13:55. I have smoked the whole 0.10 now. I vary between being very cautious with the probability of stumbling upon hallucinations and whatnot, as is the case with the Datura trip, and feeling quite at ease. But smoking it seems to be completely different after all. Lately this plant has aroused a lot of curiosity with me, and I would like to be able to have a conversation with someone who uses this regularly. To be able to compare effects and discuss its uses, that would be interesting. My vision eye is more on the unclear side now, and maybe understanding how the dreamy state of the trip could feel like. Writing is slightly more difficult. I'm focused but still not quite after all anymore. I think I'm having side vision blips of hallucinatory occurrences. I'm not sure. As if something has just happened almost completely out of sight, but I didn't quite catch it. Not much, but maybe twice or thrice now. I feel like I wouldn't be able to write and explain my feelings around things, but in another way I guess that's what I'm doing. I feel mentally quietly euphorically distanced, as opposed to in some even slightly dramatic way. I don't think I should smoke anymore. I feel a bit ridiculous about it since I only have a little bit of the whole leaf left. 1408. That feeling of how ridiculous it would be to be that far from a complete leaf overpowered me, and I'll smoke the remainder now and see how it is. And go outside. I need to shop and run some errands. I'll write more when I get back. 1502. Well, now I've been out and about and I've enjoyed it. The smoking of this Datura leaf has reduced any anxiety levels which otherwise might be. It has more than anything else put me in a relaxed, enjoyable state which allows me to enjoy the passing moment more. Put more focus into little things. I've read how this is an aphrodisiac and I can completely understand it as such, not that I've become a horn dog, but thinking about the euphoric tendencies, focus of moment, loss of worry, etc. I think it can be interesting under sexual affairs. I'm still feeling it, and the way this high sticks around it doesn't feel like it will fade anytime soon, though the peak has quite a while ago. I really don't know what more to say. I recommend this. I personally could recommend it medically if you have anxiety, for sure not on a daily basis. We don't know what that does yet, but I feel as though it definitely smooths out any fear. A doctor might say something else, and I'm only an individual reaction to a scarcely understood plant right now, so do anything with this plant at your own risk. I personally don't know if I would drink the tea anytime. At least not anytime soon. But smoking leaves? Often. For nearly 2 years, I have had quite a fascination with solanaceous plants. I read everything I could find on Daturas, Brugmanses, nightshade, and the like. I had experimented with small doses of Brugmansia, and smaller still of Datura to little effect: a dry throat and tired, dilated pupils. I finally decided to really give it a try, and ate about 100 seeds, about 20 on the hour and then 40 or so at once. I also smoked about a dozen. I then ate 2 Datura leaves and 2 Brugmansia leaves. I noticed very little until I decided to go to bed at about 11:30. After a while of not sleeping, as sometimes I get very bad insomnia, I decided to read a book. I sat up in bed and began to read some readily available story. I can't now recall what it was about, but I found it very interesting. Ironically, I was reminded of a Datura report here at Erowid called The Infinity Book. I then looked away from the book and looked back, and there was nothing there except my hands, palms up as if holding a book. Wow, I thought that was one nifty hallucination. I didn't feel at all high at this time, no confusion or delirium. I continued to lay in bed as people I know streamed through my door one at a time. They would either face away from me when I tried to converse with them, or just stare blankly at me and smile or giggle once in a while. A close friend of mine walked in at one point and stared at me coldly while I asked her how she was that night. For some reason I would always try to start small talk with these people even though I sort of knew they weren't really there. She then proceeded to crawl up onto my desk and assume a fetal position for several minutes before disappearing. One thing that happened throughout the experience was my trying to grab things that weren't there. I would be thirsty and reach for a water bottle only to have my hand go right through it. I would try to adjust my pillow or retrieve a blanket, but my hand would slide right through them. It became really irritating. Several other strange things happened that night, such as seeing what looked like hundreds of large black rodents scurrying around my floor and watching a television that I found to not be on, similar to the book thing. All in all, it was a very nice experience. Very strange but sort of comforting and not at all scary. Young and adventurous, willing to go the whole 9 yards at the drop of a pin, I caught a glimpse of something I wish I never saw. Standing proud in the garden of a complete stranger, a plant that was to change my mental state forever. The worst thing I've ever done. I waited until night to make my move, raping the beast of the flowers that made it so recognizable. Boiling them up in a little water, I made a potion that would make me anything but the person that was born from my mother's womb. Drinking the muddy-looking water was far from pleasant, and so were the effects. About 15 minutes rolled by and I was sitting scratching my head waiting, and bang. All of a sudden I was locked in an extremely uncomfortable rushing sort of feeling. This lasted for roughly 5 minutes, and was followed by blurred vision. I could not read anything small. I was looking at my watch trying to read the time, but no matter how close or how far I held it from my face it was a blur. It wasn't long before I was totally removed from the real world, and placed into a world of pleasure, fear, and discomfort. If there is a hell, I was on a day trip. Walking around the house in an attempt to find myself, I was switching between fun times and bad times. I walked into my bedroom and as I passed my wall mirror, I saw a stranger in my room. Standing to the side of the mirror, I was thinking, who the fuck is that? It was about 5 minutes before I realized that it was my own reflection, and stood there laughing at my own stupidity. Time seemed to just slip by, and before I knew it the next day had arrived. Smoking imaginary cigarettes, walking outside completely naked, and talking to people who would disappear into thin air, I started wondering if this was going to end at all. It did end after time, but it was not nice. I was out of it for 2 days, and coming down from it was very scary. It was a very evil feeling. I felt like I had sold my soul to the devil. I can't really explain it, but it is not something that I can ever forget. If I could find a time machine, I would go back and undo the terrible mistake that I made when I collected evil from someone's garden. I'm 19 years old. I started trying out different drugs for the first time when I was on the road in August of this year. I've tried DXM, that was the first thing I tried, and probably the second most powerful, morning glory seeds, Stadol, a kappa opioid agonist synthetic opiate that is snorted in 1 mg doses, causes dysphoria instead of typical opiate euphoria, very strange, Vicodin, Salvia, and most recently, Datura. Datura is by far the most powerful drug I've tried thus far, and my experience with it is making me seriously consider whether I will ever use psychoactives again. Please note, before I continue, that I have never used marijuana. I'm not particularly religious about my drug experiments, but I'm not very interested in being messed up or high. If you're considering taking Datura because you don't have enough cash for a dime, then read this account, or just take my word for it and don't do it. About a week ago, I was out walking at night, and I came across a Datura plant. I live in Southern California, in the desert, and I think that the thorn apples in my area are Deonoxia, as that is the species that Mexican shamans used. The plant was large, and had not flowered yet. I was aware of the fact that Daturas bear tropane alkaloids, and that they can be used to induce delirium and hallucinations. I pulled up the plant and twisted off the root, which was white and about the size of a medium carrot. I carried it home and went to bed. The next day I got up and did some research on the plant. To my dismay, I could not find any accounts of people who had consumed the root. I'm sure there are some here, but I haven't looked that hard. References differ as to whether the root or the leaves are stronger, and also, interestingly, belladonna roots may bear more apotropane than the rest of the plant, and I think apotropane is even more toxic than scopolamine. So I just assumed that the roots were as strong as the seeds on a weight basis, and proceeded with caution. First I tried smoking small shavings from the root, mixed with pipe tobacco in a pipe. I used the tobacco to keep it lit. It made me feel rather sick, but I think that was mostly the tobacco, as I am not used to inhaling tobacco smoke and the blend was rather strong. A few minutes later I noted my pulse was around 90, my pupils were dilated, and I felt a little weird. These symptoms wore away after about 90 minutes. I was wary of the plant, but felt positive enough to proceed. Over the next few days I cut up the root and dried it in the fridge so that it would keep, and tried increasingly larger doses of it orally, getting up to around 2 grams maybe. The symptoms, even the dilation of the pupils, wore away after a few hours each time, and I never felt as though I'd reached the dose that causes delirium. On Wednesday night, October 15th, at 9:30 p.m., I decided I was going to hit it harder and get it over with. I thought that perhaps the alkaloids were similar enough to nicotine to be snorted like snuff. I knew that snorting snuff was incredibly more powerful than smoking tobacco, so I decided that doing the same thing with Datura would be an interesting experiment. I took a strip of the dried root, and ran it through a coffee grinder till it was quite shredded. I better clean that thing out before my dad uses it for coffee, then ground it into a powder with my mortar and pestle. At 9:45, I snorted half of it up one nostril, then the rest up the other. I sat down in bed to read Dracula. I often read on drugs now, and I have finished quite a few books that way, and waited hopefully for about 20 minutes. It didn't do anything to me that I observed, except burn my nose quite a bit. So far as I can tell, this probably just contributed to the oral dose. Then, at 10:30, I consumed 1 gram of the dried root, chewing the vile stuff and washing it down with water. At 11 o'clock, I decided that wasn't enough and ate 3 more grams of it. I nearly retched, it was so bitter, but I got it down. I do not recommend doing this, especially without a sitter. When you consume Datura, it can make your intestines stop pushing food forward, and thus remain in your system for days, continuously building up in your bloodstream as it is all absorbed. If your intestines stop working when they are full of food and large quantities of poisonous plants, then you are seriously risking death. This was extremely stupid of me. However, in my wisdom's meager defense, I did take a small amount. I fasted all day, and I drank a lot of water. So, long about 12:30, reading began to become impossible. Not only could I no longer understand the book, but my vision began to be distorted. I am normally nearsighted, and I wear about 350 prescription glasses. Well, with my glasses on, they still made far vision clear, like they normally do, but they made near vision so blurry that I couldn't make out the words in the book. When I took them off, near vision became clear, and far vision was blurry, like normal. All peripheral vision was quite blurry. I gave up reading and simply laid down for the experience. Suddenly, in the proverbial blink of an eye, it was about 1:15 a.m., my mouth was completely dry, and my eyes stung. I was tremendously hungry, but knew that I shouldn't eat. I made for the kitchen, intending to drink a little bit of milk. I got up and set out for the hallway, and I ran right into the door frame of my bedroom, and fell down on my ass. I soon discovered this was going to be the norm for the rest of the night. Whenever I chose a path, I could never possibly follow it. It was as though the wall and furniture jumped into my path. I held my hands out in front of me like a blind man, and stumbled through my house in a frantic daze. I live with my family, but they were all asleep, or at least I thought they were. When I got to the kitchen, I decided I was far too queasy to eat or drink anything but water. I returned to my bedroom, but a while later I went to the kitchen again decided I was too queasy, and again returned to my room. I knew I'd already done this once, but didn't have the sense to not try it again. The night wore on, and I frankly don't know very much of what happened. I wondered about the house more, and decided I hadn't taken enough of the drug, because I was sure I wasn't hallucinating. Boy, was I wrong. Because I was sure I hadn't taken enough of the drug, I decided to sleep off the rest of the trip. I turned off the lights in my room and tried to go to sleep. I gave up trying to sleep when I realized that I was pounding my pillow in a regular rhythm and singing softly, and reached up over my bed to where my reading lamp is. I hit the switch, and there was a blue flash, indicating that the incandescent bulb had burned out. This angered me very much, but I decided to try and get back up anyway, because I had run out of water and my lips were cracking from dryness. So, I tried very hard to cross my room in the dark, and ran into my trash can, which is nearly in the opposite direction from the door. I knocked it over, and it spilled across my floor, and made quite a bit of noise. Of course, my room was pitch black, so I practically had to feel for the doorknob. On the way back to my room I ran my forehead right into a wall, quite hard. Thus, with a good-sized bump on my head, I went back to my room and begged my body to fall asleep. I desperately wanted the whole thing to be over. I was flushed and cold and overstimulated, and I passed in and out of sleep. I had an incredible number of dreams, so vivid that I sometimes spoke aloud in reply to them or sat up suddenly from surprise. Eventually, I woke up at about 11 a.m. This is where things got weird. First of all, my trash can was knocked over and I had a bump on my forehead, but my reading light wasn't burned out. I always turn it on when I get up at night, and it illuminates my entire bedroom, but I had knocked over my trash can in complete darkness. Second of all, there were 5 water cups on my nightstand, and I had only started with 1. They were all partly full. And most importantly, I'd had conversations with my dad and my sister, which I only have the most fleeting recollection of. My sister had said something to me at about 2:30, and I'd mumbled a reply to her which was completely unintelligible, but also I'd motioned to my forehead, where I'd bumped myself. Then my dad found me, at 4:30 in the morning, standing in the middle of my room. He had come in because he had heard a loud crashing sound. He told me that I should be in bed and I yelled at him that I was going to be in a minute. I have a very vague recollection of deciding to try and use the computer and seeing him, but it seems less real than many of the dreams. The current story that my family believes is that I was sleepwalking, and I can't bring myself to tell them the truth. That was Thursday morning. Now it is 11 a.m. Friday morning. When I got up yesterday morning, I was still seeing things, Mostly of a sort of blurry movement variety, like there were insects crawling around on things, but I found that I could walk around without hitting walls. I was incapable of typing, as though my fingers were all thumbs, or like the keys moved when I reached for them. I had a sore throat and a fever, and simply felt generally sick. My glasses were still making near vision extremely blurry, and they did that all day. And I couldn't see anything outside without sunglasses, it was so bright. Even now, Friday morning, even though all of the other effects have passed, my pupils are still dilated, and I still feel queasy. I learned more about safety than anything else from this trip. I was a damned fool to not take Datura in the presence of someone who could sit for me. I could have easily tripped over my trash can and landed headfirst on the tile floor, or injured myself in any of a variety of other ways, not to mention that my pulse was probably about 130 for 8 hours. I have come to a personal conclusion about this substance, in light of what it did to me. Here it is. Datura makes you nuts, absolutely crazy, and anyone who is considering doing it should. 1. Study, then study some more. Consider it from the point of view of your physical and mental health, and figure out what the risks are. Are you really sure that you want to take something that belongs to a class of drugs known as delirious? You can buy salvia in most paraphernalia shops nowadays. Worst thing anyone's ever gotten from moderate doses of that is a headache. Larger doses and you may wonder about, get a sitter for that. 2. Find a sample that you want. The roots, leaves, and seeds all have differing alkaloid compositions, and one might do something very different from the other. For instance, atropine is a stimulant and scopolamine is a depressant, so the dominance of one over the other in a sample from a nightshade could mean an extremely different trip. Also, scopolamine has a much lower LD50 than atropine. Have a way to measure your sample. With seeds this is somewhat easy because you count them. Caution, potency may vary tremendously from plant to plant. You may weigh more than me, and take less than me, and have a much more intense trip than I did, but with other parts of the plant you need a scale. I used a balance my mom bought for pottery glazes. 3. Get a sitter. Since you've read my account, it should be obvious that you absolutely need one. Even if you didn't have to worry about injuring yourself, you might have an insight that you'd forget if you didn't tell it to someone immediately. You may have a medical crisis, as well. It is far from unheard of to end up in the emergency room from Datura or any of the other nightshades. Finally, be absolutely sure that you want to do this. Take it from me, or from virtually all of the rest of the accounts of using it on the internet, Datura is both absolutely no fun and thoroughly dangerous. My experience is very much like Buzz's trip. I was convinced by a friend to take the drug at a party, very convenient that a Datura tree was right outside. Anyway, I made a salad out of the 2 plants that I found on the ground, and for about 2 hours afterward I did not feel a thing. Well, that soon changed. I started feeling really sleepy, and thought that it was just fatigue from being at the party for so long. Keep in mind I had not had anything to drink or smoke. I remember starting to get bored, and that is all I remember before waking up on the floor of the party with everyone dancing around me, or so I thought. Well, it turned out that there were no dancers and that it was time for me to leave the party. The owner of the house kept telling me to leave. I remember asking him what I did wrong to get kicked out of the party. I mean, I saw tons of people dancing, drinking and having fun, but in reality none was there. I was the last guest. I decided that this sucked and would just go home. Several of my friends decided to leave the party and join me walking home, but as you can guess nobody was there but me. The walk home consisted of me talking to my friends who were sometimes there and then would just vanish while I was talking to them. I also saw a lot of my friends just standing on street corners saying hi when I was walking past them. I thought that this was normal and I did not think twice about it. As I was walking I noticed several one-legged people staring at me. I did not know why, but they just kept staring at me. Everywhere I went they were there staring. It was not till I came down did I realize that the one-legged people were actually parking meters. I can write forever about that night, but I will just add a few more things, like trying to ride my skateboard home and realizing that it was an oil slick, leaving my real skateboard on the bus because it was too fucking heavy to grab, trying to read a book and all the pages were blank, the smoking problem, I would light a smoke and smoke it, but it was never lit, spilling water and cleaning it up for hours but I never spilled the water. The scenario just kept repeating in my head for hours, and finally having my Nintendo. This was around 1992 when I tried this, controller melt in my hand. I think the strangest thing about the trip was that I thought everything was normal. I did not know I was tripping. To me everything was just that way. I don't remember how long the trip lasted. I had no sense of time, But I do remember the horrible 2 days afterward when I was nearly blind because of the drug, could not read or tell time on my watch, everything was blurry. Also, I did not remember anything that happened till the next day. I had a pretty good trip, I guess. I did not get hurt and I made it home somehow. I remember all of the streets looking the same. I would definitely not take this drug again, nor would I recommend it. If you do take it, have a sober friend with you. Also be very careful on how much you take, as you can die if you eat too much. D0. Me and my friend M each ate 1.5 tablespoons of mature yellow-brown seeds, chewed them up really good and washed down with water. D plus 1 hour. Both feeling drunk and heavy, we both lay down on the bed. At some time, approximately 15 minutes after, we blacked out. D plus 4 hours. I woke up finding M sleeping next to me, and my friend A from school, also next to me, leaning on the wall and aiming the fan on us, while sleeping. I tried to wake him but nothing would work, so I looked to M for help, but instead of M it was A sleeping next to me. I looked to the wall, and no one was there. I waked up M and asked it to go home, so I can go to sleep. Felt somehow uncomfortable. D plus 5.5 hours. I'm not sure what went wrong, but I couldn't sleep well. I'm laying on my bed, feeling the dryness. I must get water, and the bottle was empty, so I was trying to get up. I see two huge, shadow-like guys with two different weird faces I can hardly remember, like Matrix agents but different, and one was fatter, with small red and bright lights as eyes blocking the both of my doors. Got 2 doors. I somehow got a grip and reminded myself I'm tripping, and got up in front of the shadow dude, and red circles appear on both of their eyes that start to bleed a lot. I covered my head and waited a while. After that they were gone. D plus 6 hours. My sis was in the kitchen. I was making coffee for 2. She told me to hold something for her but I was busy with the coffee, so I passed it to my friend M while saying, "Hold this a second, bro." That appeared on the way to the kitchen. It hit the floor. "What's wrong with you?" "Ah, just woke up." I went upstairs with 1 coffee. Lost some time here. D plus 9 hours. Laying on the bed feeling a bit poised, some bottles on my table were spinning on spot. The key in the door split to 2 and started crawling like a worm all over. A crack in the wall was taking over the walls and room. Some grapes I had on the table grew legs and walked around the room. Same with paint dots and black dots on the floor. My floor is hard to describe. I remembering everything was going crazy, but I was calm. This skull I got was bouncing from one speaker to the other. Wires were moving around like snakes. Blood stains appeared on the walls, and friends were flashing like changing a channel. Some of the friends that appeared didn't want to talk out loud, and talk to me in my head. Like telepathy, lots of sparks flew around some point. I watched a movie on my broken TV and ate out of a bowl of snacks all the, approximately 1 to 1.5 hour, movie. At the end I noticed it was all unreal, and before I was in a total trance, no idea what the movie was. Fell asleep a bit later. The next day, I wake up to my mom knocking at the door asking for something. I gave her something no way related, and then what she asked for. 4 friends of mine were behind of her. As she turned, I greeted them, shook hands, etc., and she didn't notice. They sat down. I turned to lock the door and back and they were gone. I laid back down on the bed. My t-shirt that was on the bed turned into this mini mad cow with spiral red-orange squares as eyes and horns of a demon. It ran straight to me, and I freaked and jumped back. Then it became the shirt again. Day 2 plus 5 hours. Found myself ending a chat with a tree. The grass started growing really high so I went back in. After that I remember sitting in the living room and looking at pictures get their own life. Spent most of the day talking to people, animals that were not there, and my cat, my MJ plant, that skull on the speaker, and smoked unreal cigarettes. While I had 2 packs, one real and one not, I remember twice, I smoked, the cig was gone. So I take out a real one, but from the wrong pocket. Taking another fake cig that would disappear after 2 minutes. Smoke sometimes came out of real objects, and some shadows were moving with no connection to their objects. I took this whole trip as a once-in-a-lifetime, and last, trip to a very very deep place in my mind. The after effects were long-lasting and really scary, as in a thought, shit I fucked myself up, even when I was aware of the after effects, but, thank God, this was all gone. 3 to 4 days of really messed up eyes, splits, fogged/blurred vision, etc. For about a week I was feeling really weird and unconnected to the world. Smoking weed sometimes made things fly in the corners of my eyes and stuff. Beware. P.S. Day 2 and most day 1 I was home alone. If you anyway decide to try Datura, do it far from sober people. I was spare changing the other day here in Eugene, Oregon, and some guy approached me and asked if I knew anyone who was interested in hallucinogens. I am always looking for hallucinogens, so I said I was and asked what he had. He said he had some pure Datura extract. I had absolutely no money, but he gave me some for free. He told me that I had about an hour and a half to get out of public. I went to my friend's apartment to return her bike and see if she would babysit me. She wasn't there, but her roommates were. They let me in and I sat down and they told me not to get too comfortable because they were leaving in 10 minutes. I went to drink something and then went immediately to the bathroom. After I pissed, I went out, drank some more water and then went immediately back into the bathroom. I was in there for a few minutes when they started yelling that I had to get out of the bathroom because they had to leave. When I opened the door, I was asked what the fuck I was still doing there and I said I had to use the bathroom and to calm down. I wasn't all that coherent at that point and the male roommate took a verbally aggressive approach to me and I asked him, "Are you fucking kidding me?" He then threatened me with violence if I didn't get out. I left. I don't remember the next few hours at all, but I have pieced things together. Next, I found my way into their neighbor's kitchen. I started playing with things in their kitchen. Then they asked me to leave also and I did, not really realizing what I was doing. I then went to the lower level of the apartment complex and attempted to open all the doors on that level. Then someone in the complex called this free clinic who helps the homeless like myself, and they sent the Cahoots van over. Basically they go around Eugene and pick up people who are too fucked up to be in society. I had a hard time getting into the van because I had a hard enough time walking or anything else. They then took me to this clinic and got someone I knew to come and take care of me. After a little silliness and me not understanding where I was and why I couldn't leave, I made up a bed out of all these pillows and a sleeping bag. I laid down and attempted to sleep, but whenever I tried I would have these intense visions or dreams. I'm not quite sure what they were. One of these visions took me flying over Eugene. I could see places I hang out at and all sorts of other shit. Then my visions started to take me to all sorts of different settings and there were people there that I would talk to and they would talk back to me. I could hear them but no one else could. These types of visions lasted for hours and hours. I also had no clear concept of the people who were around me, I only knew who one was for sure. At one point in the evening, I went into the bathroom to pee and after I started peeing, my dog ran in followed by another dog and a small puppy. They all started drinking from the toilet and I saw the puppy jump in over its head and start to get flushed down the toilet. Then I stuck my hand down into the toilet to save this puppy and my friend grabbed my arm telling me that there was no puppy whatsoever. When I went back into that room, I could have sworn I saw my friend there with her daughter. Her daughter was asleep at first so I was all quiet and she soon awoke. I didn't know where her mother was so I picked her up and started to comfort her. Then I asked if she wanted any water and she responded with a nod of the head. I then got someone to get me a cup and she then didn't want any. I made her a bed and put her back to sleep. I found out later the next day that my friend and her kid were not there at all. I mistook a stuffed white bunny rabbit for my friend's child. There were a lot more visions after that. At one point I could have sworn that my bed was infested with spiders. I am an arachnophobe so that didn't go over well with me. I shook out my sleeping bag and then moved my bed to another point in the room. I was laying down again and I heard someone yell, "Hey, phone call." I then yelled, "I got it." It was my mother on the phone saying that she was in Eugene at this hotel and I should go and see her because she had a surprise for me. I left the room and my friend asked me where I was going and I just said I would be right back. I had completely forgotten my shoes. I found where my mother had told me to go although I didn't remember her giving me directions or a cross street. While I was walking there, I felt a presence behind me and I turned, caught a glimpse of someone and blinked and then disappeared. After I got to the motel, I couldn't find the room number she had said. I looked all around the parking lot for her and couldn't find her worth a damn. Then I saw her sitting in a car at the end of the lot and I walked over there. She wasn't really in the car. I then went up to a higher floor and was looking around and I didn't see her but I could hear her. I then started seeing other people who when I looked directly at them, they melted into different things like telephone poles and signs and trees. Some of the bigger trees I was convinced that they were just on the other side so I would keep talking to them and then chase them around the tree. After a while, when I couldn't find my mom, I started thinking of how we had a family reunion that same day and it was in NY and I knew for sure that my mom was in NY and not in Eugene. I gave up and couldn't find my way back to where I stayed. I then went to a neighborhood I knew was familiar and got my dog and some food. It was a very crazy night. I don't remember all of it all that clearly, and at times, I was downright frightened. I found out a day later that some kids who also took Datura that same night ended up hospitalized and arrested. I guess I was the lucky one. I have taken a lot of hallucinogens in the past and at times in very large amounts, and was still not fully prepared for what I was about to do. Datura made LSD seem like a cup of coffee. I don't think I am ever going to do Datura again, unless I am in a different situation completely. Be very wary if you try Datura that it can kill you if you take too much. Make sure that you have a babysitter for yourself arranged beforehand and explain to them what may happen. The only side effect that hasn't gone away yet is that my vision was extremely blurry. I am still having trouble seeing perfectly. My experience lasted for a little over 16 hours. My buddy John, who moved to the Midwest, where I lived, from Florida, had always brought up some great plant which he called angel trumpets. They grew fluently where he used to live. He had brought some back home after visiting his native land one time, and I tried his tea but only got tired and fell asleep. Well, one night sometime later, while walking into my girlfriend's house with her, John, and 2 other buddies, John made the discovery that she had these tripping flowers growing in her garden. She had the house to herself for the weekend, so we figured, what the hell, let's boil some up. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. We picked about 7 good-sized flowers and about 8 pods and brought them back in. After boiling all this up and mixing it with some tea, my buddy Brent, my girlfriend, and I split it up evenly and drank our glass. This was at about 10:30. Within the hour I felt the drowsiness of being extremely drunk. I felt normal, just off balance and woozy. My mouth had dried up very bad and my speech was starting to slur. At about midnight, John and my 2 other friends decided to leave. I had wanted to buy a dime bag off Brent for the last 30 minutes but couldn't pronounce a single word I tried to say. Everything just came out as one big mumble. As they left, I remembered my girlfriend, Shannon, left her car down the street at a friend's. We hopped in my car and took the short cruise to hers. At this point I had still felt very off balance, and had an extremely dry mouth, but other than that was more than able to maintain. Those 7 minutes of quick driving, however, was the last time I would feel normal that night. Shannon and I got back home and decided that we were just very tired and weren't upset, seeing as how we hadn't spent any money, just simply picked the flowers from her garden. Now this is where the night gets extremely intense. After filling a large glass of water, we went upstairs to retire, put on some more comfortable attire and crawled into bed. By now my mouth was so dry it seemed as though the water was only making it worse. As I was settling into bed, Shannon was scurrying about her room like a teen cleaning his room after school, only to see his mom home early from work. She was picking up random items, 2 or 3 at a time, and merely switching their placement on her dresser. She continued this around her whole room while I laid there and tried pleading with her to just get into bed. At this point it was about 1 o'clock and I could not utter a word that made any sense at all. After 5 minutes of trying to get her to come to bed, I gave up and she finally left the room. Shortly after, I heard a bang. She had slipped down the stairs. I thought no big deal and just laid there. A minute later I heard a loud crash, but thought it was her cat who had knocked something over. Now we had been dating for quite some time, and during the time she had never had a cat. Laying in bed I was spinning but not nauseated. My mouth was so dry I almost gagged. I had to pee so bad, so I got up and stumbled to the upstairs bathroom, running into everything in my way. I stood in the bathroom confused, as there was nothing in it. I then remembered, which was my only rational thought the entire night, that the upstairs bathroom was being redone. I stood there confused again, not knowing what I was going to do. I saw the pipes sticking out of the wall and decided that's where I was to take aim. I quickly realized that there must be a better place to pee and walked down the hall to the computer room. This room was being used to store the counter, which was removed from the bathroom. With the top completely removed, I felt that this is where I was supposed to go in. Again I realized it wasn't the place and started down the stairs. I had run into the shop vac at the top, which I had already hit on the way to the bathroom. I got downstairs, opened the front door and deemed it the proper spot to pee. I even got my pants down before ceasing activity. Now this whole time I was being rushed through a chain of thoughts which seemed perfectly fine but suddenly hit me as a bad idea. By now time and thought train were completely irrelevant. While I think it was about 2 o'clock now, I was totally oblivious of a concept of time. I couldn't make sense of anything and could only think of what I was doing at the moment. I turned towards the downstairs bathroom where I saw Shannon sitting on against the wall in a pile of broken wood and glass, I mean all over the kitchen floor. She was awake and just sitting with a blank stare. Nothing registered that this wasn't right. I walked into the bathroom, finally relived myself and walked back into the kitchen. As I did this, I was barefoot. I stepped on a big piece of glass, which went deep into my foot. This is where the hallucinations started. Though I saw the glass, it didn't seem wrong to walk right over it. I worked in a stockroom where the floor was always covered in glass, so it seemed fine to walk across the wood floor with no shoes or socks on. I sat down to remove the glass and then looked up to see all three people who were there earlier. Someone said that I should get a band-aid, so I limped back into the bathroom, passing my semi-conscious girlfriend on the way. Once again I felt as it was normal that she was laying there not moving. By the way, she wasn't hurt except for a bump on the head. I knew there was no band-aids in that bathroom but looked hard anyway. Hell, there aren't even cabinets in that bathroom, just a sink and a toilet. I went back to the kitchen to join the crowd and told them of the shortage of medical aid. Now you have to realize that this whole time no one else was in the house. The hallucinations were so real that I had no feeling of tripping. Not once did it cross my mind that anything out of the ordinary was going on. I stumbled back up the stairs, once again hitting everything on the way, and climbed back into bed. Now, like I said, I had no concept of time, but the period from when I had left the bed to when I came back was probably 5 minutes. No more than 3 seconds after getting under the covers I had to go to the bathroom again. And not just had to go, but I was about to burst. I jumped out of bed and ran quickly downstairs, running into everything that I had before. These things included her desk, the door, the shop vac, and the wall to the stairway. I once again used the John and went quickly upstairs. At this point I stopped paying attention to the mess in the kitchen and my girlfriend who was laying in it. I ran back up the stairs, climbed into bed and again instantly had to pee. This was really going on. I was really peeing, and having to go again a minute later. On one of the trips I carefully walked out of the bedroom, trying very hard not to run right into the shop vac, but failed miserably. I continued this same pattern over and over until I passed out. Somehow I actually woke up in the bed that I had so desperately tried to settle in all night. It was morning now and Shannon wasn't in the room. I was out of the crazy trip I had fallen into that night. I still had a very dry mouth but was able to achieve rational thought. I eventually found Shannon asleep downstairs in her basement, which we had not been in all night. She was practically still in her daze but could function, unlike the last time I saw her. I couldn't read anything all day long. My vision wasn't blurry until I tried seeing numbers. My phone was impossible to focus on, and that continued throughout the day. To say the experience was intense is an understatement. Unlike being extremely drunk, or tripping very hard where one could explain to themselves the effects of their mental state, Datura leaves one helpless to differentiate mind from reality. All of the hallucinations caused by this drug are as real as if they were actually there. That night the third guy who drank the tea was arrested leaving a gas station at 5 a.m., after he had left a buddy's house. This gas station was 2 towns over 10 miles in the opposite direction of his house. He was alone but called his buddy as soon as he was let out and sent home, thinking that they were together. 3 months after the event I found out things that I saw or experienced were completely non-existent. My buddies had to literally convince me that they were not there to see any broken glass that night. Datura will put you out of your mind and is something only to be experienced, not done recreationally. The dose that the 3 of us took was enormous and way more than what 3 people should have taken. Be extremely cautious when taking this drug as it will put you into unreality. So I've been waiting for a chance to try Datura for a while now. I read a lot about it and I thought I was ready for what's to come. I invited an old female friend over to spot me since she tried almost every drug out there, Datura not included, and after she got here I told her not to let me smoke, pour water down my throat if I seem not to manage to do it myself. Hell, I even had handcuffs ready for if I go berserk and try to attack her. I told her to check my pulse and temperature every once in a while and to call the hospital immediately if anything seems wrong. I then went and crushed about a quarter tablespoon and mixed it with about 330 milliliters of water. I boiled it for a few minutes, let it chill, and drank it in small sips. I did not drink the seed leftovers. So we sat and talked for about 20 minutes before it hit me. I thought that since I used such a small dosage I'll be only mildly experimenting with it rather than fucking myself up, but was I wrong? At the beginning I felt very nauseous, my guts hurt and my mouth went dry. Since it was bearable I decided to drink some Coke and try to let it pass. By now I was hurting all over, my head started pounding as if I was in the sun too long and hadn't a drink for hours. The pain was overwhelming, but apparently my pulse was still within normal because although my friend seemed rather worried, she did not call the hospital. I felt as if claws were closing on my stomach, but my head was somewhere else. Kind of a fainting feel. I'm out. I wake up in my bed a couple of days later, Saturday. My friend proved her friendship and stayed right next to me for the entire period of time. She said that for the first night she cuffed me to my bed because she didn't want to go to sleep when I'm like that, but then she said I was like moaning, so she untied me. I wasn't violent. I wasn't moving. She said that I wasn't there at all. I was looking forward with eyes halfway open and entirely dilated. I wasn't mumbling most of the time, and I can't recall a thing. I kind of shrieked sometimes. I did pee on myself, but I was ready for that and covered my bed with plastic bags under the sheets. I was sweating like hell, but it was fairly hot. The only thing I remember was an occasional gag over a water bottle that was shoved in my face. I did not hallucinate that, and probably did not hallucinate at all. If I did, I cannot remember a thing of it. After I woke up, I still had a fever, but my pulse was perfectly normal. I did not bleed and did not die, but it did not feel like a trip. You can get the same response from drinking a nice glass of bleach. Don't. The most dominant pain was the stomach clawing. After that was the dryness, which was taken care of by my good friend whose friendship I came to value even more. I couldn't see almost at all, but this calmed down rather quickly for me. I want to stress that this is not the commonly used Datura, but the kind that grows around these areas. This is just strictly poison. Stephen Miller wrote, "What is the possibility of ending up in a psych hospital from using either of these? I have a friend that took a handful at the NV test site this summer. He experienced 3 days of intense delirium. On his third day he showed up at my doorstep in Salt Lake City and proceeded to tell me the story with full hyper-metaphoric spiritual insight detours over the course of about 3 or 4 hours. It might have been more F memory, you know. Anyway, this winter he still insists that he has not fully recovered. Apparently this is the deal. The seeds are heavy duty if you are seriously into fucking with, remapping, your head in seriously chaotic ways. This is your vehicle if you think you can survive it." My friend probably almost didn't. A much milder version of this trip, one that is, so I have heard, relatively safe, can be had by making a tea with the leaves. I have not tried this and do not specifically recall anyone else who had first-hand experience. My friend threw the remainder of his seeds out the window, so perhaps in the spring. I can confirm the validity of the description above from my own experience. This was from a tea made out of the leaves of Datura stramonium. If you want hallucinations, this is your drug. However, you are not there to experience them. This stuff takes over completely and irreversibly for at least 24 hours. Stupidly, I went out while the effects had not yet fully started. After having been thrown out of a bar, where I was desperately searching for my briefcase that was supposed to be there someplace, but which I hadn't even with me, I found myself in a city that I did not recognize. I did not remember where I came from, where to go, what to do, who I was, let alone what I was doing there at this time of night, nor did I have any clue how to get home, as far as there was still a conception of what home might be. There was complete retrograde amnesia, no access to any knowledge at all. In the meantime, I had encounters with people I knew that were able to do a disappearing act. Just by standing behind a light pole they could make themselves invisible. This must be the witch's Sabbath hallucination, which seems recurrent in this type of delirium, the very real hallucination of speaking with people. Also, I was constantly hallucinating that I was smoking a cigarette, which would suddenly disappear, leaving me searching the street, thinking that I dropped it. Witches are actually shrubs growing in front yards. They live underground. The branches are the hairs. Lots and lots of little bugs hand each other berries along branches. I must have walked the same street 50 times back and forth, wanting to get somewhere, forgetting where I was going to or where I was in the first place. A small statue of a child alongside the road started laughing and laughing harder and harder every time I passed. It was a ridiculous sight to see this idiot come by for the 40th time, even for a statue. And so on. For 24 hours. It was a really interesting experience, not a nice one. I could not see straight for a week, due to anticholinergic parasympathetic effect of atropine/scopolamine. Only for those who want to be able to say that they tried everything. The interesting thing about Datura is the power of the experience. Ketamine is the only other drug that creates anything remotely like this, but I haven't tried DMT. Unlike K, which is very otherworldly and downright bizarre, Datura is very earthy and familiar. Nonetheless, both can be used as tools to explore reality. It's difficult to explain the difference in a few words. So, I'll give an example of a typical Datura trip, Stage 2. The Infinity Book. I'm propped up in bed, reading an amazing book. The topic is really fascinating and resonates with my interests. When I get to the bottom of the right-hand page, I try to slide my hand behind the page, to turn it over and continue reading. But there are no more pages, and I flip fresh air. In fact, there is no book. I'm propped up in bed, with my empty hands, palms up, lying on my lap. I'm surprised and irritated that there are no more pages. But, the topic was so interesting that I decide it's worth reading again. When I start reading at the top of the left-hand page, the book is about a totally different topic. Which is just as fascinating, so I quickly read to the bottom of the right-hand page, and try flip over the page to continue the story. But, there are no more pages. So I start reading from the beginning again. And, wow, another totally different yet fascinating topic. I read eagerly and come across an amazing sentence. I decide to read it again. My eye scans to the beginning of the sentence and I start reading. But the topic has changed again. And so it goes. Basically, any hesitation on my part, any break in the flow, would switch the topic. Always great reading though. So I languished in bed for a few hours reading my endlessly fascinating, Infinity Book. I had learned about Datura long ago in the beloved vaults. As I remember, it was not too amazing to me at the time, but consider myself an herbalist, so someday I hope to see a living Datura plant, simply because I have a love for all plants. When walking to a friend's house after school one day, I spotted what I believed to be a Datura stramonium shrub standing out beside the sidewalk. Immediately, I was overcome with excitement, which I can't exactly explain. The Datura spirit had found me. Since that day, I have felt that there is some sort of spiritual bond between she and I. The day I found her growing rampantly about my family and neighbors' woodland homes, I was delighted. I learned much about the plant, and I'm currently trying to grow one myself. It was not until last night that I learned of the reaction between her form and a human being. I invited a friend to spend the night, and he wanted to eat some seeds to experience Datura himself. We were hanging out in my bedroom, just having popped in a live one by fish. We lit lots of green candles, killed the full eating, and burned some very pleasant smelling punk. Both of us were feeling quite secure and content, having just spent a very warm night with two more of our friends, sitting around a fire, walking through the forest by moonlight, then staring at the sky while laying on my trampoline. My friend started with 5 seeds. Within 45 minutes he said it gave him a mild mood lift, perhaps a hint of confusion. Nothing more, and that lasted for about 2 hours. Eventually the time came to go to sleep, and I decided then to eat 5 seeds before I fell asleep to experience the dream alterations of the plant. That night was amazing. When I was falling asleep, I experienced vivid, abstract mental imagery with my eyes closed, although it was nothing like a hallucination. When asleep, I had unbelievable long and vivid dreams. The dream also was one continuing story, even though I frequently wove in and out of REM sleep and non-REM sleep. The dream seemed to take up the time period of several days. I could even tell the difference between the dream state and the non-dream states of sleeping as well, and I was generally much more aware than usual during sleep. Also, I have been trying to train myself to have lucid dreams for over a year. Last night I became lucid, but I had no control over things. This caused me to think I was in fact awake, and just as I thought that, my mind left the dream state. My friend and I slept for a total of 11 hours last night. The seeds were definitely D-stramonium, and had been kept in a Ziploc baggie for about 2 months, and were harvested from a dead plant, killed by paraquat. When I found the plant, I prayed for it, and used one of its boughs as a rattle which I shook in the 4 directions to honor it. The seeds I took were all washed and from enclosed pods, hopefully protected from the terrible poison the plant was subjected to. My friend also ate 5 more seeds before retiring and he experienced similar effects. Now that I have experienced the dream effects of Datura, I am going to assemble my own herbal dream tea. I am planning so far to include Calea, mugwort, valerian, catnip, hops, and of course, Datura. This is a magical plant, although I do not recommend it to everyone. It seems to have connections with certain people, and opposition to others. Learn who you are and which plant spirits are your brothers, sisters, parents, grandparents, and friends. Be kind and respectful towards nature, and learn about it as much as you can during your life here. Never forget, as much as we claim to synthesize pieces of nature without her help, it was she who synthesized us. On one odd note, I'd like to add that the morning after my experience, I thought I noticed a moderately heightened olfactory sense for about 1 hour. This was extremely interesting. I smelled more smells than I usually can, and wondered if that was anything like what a dog experiences. Has anyone else experienced this or even heard of it? Perhaps I was just imagining it. What I am about to describe is an account of something really stupid I did, and I don't recommend that anyone do it, but perhaps you could learn a thing or two from reading this. I had done a lot of mushrooms, and some Datura, in the past, and I wanted to see what would happen if I combined the two. Datura alone is a serious drug. It can kill you if you take too much. And the strange thing about it is that you don't know you're under its influence when it kicks in, no matter how much you try to prepare yourself. When I've done it, it has put me in a state I would compare to being asleep and dreaming vividly, but definitely not lucidly, and the difficulty in remembering the dreams and maintaining logical sequences of thoughts is roughly as it is when dreaming, only I'm walking around and trying to do things. Mushrooms, I've found to generally be a highly emotional experience. When I take them, I go through extreme changes in emotion very quickly and am often overpowered by feelings of compassion. The hallucinations seem to be secondary to that, or perhaps even a ramification of it. So what would happen if I put them both together? I wanted to try it, but didn't have anyone around to watch me, or at least, not anyone I felt comfortable telling I was experimenting with drugs. I was living with my parents at the time. This was in 2001. So I got the idea that perhaps if I also took some Zyprexa, an antipsychotic that makes me lethargic and slow, I'd be less likely to get in trouble. So I threw unmeasured amounts of Datura, psilocybin mushrooms, and Zyprexa, in a blender, and blended them into a homogeneous powder. I'd say the mixture was about half Datura, a quarter mushrooms, and a quarter Zyprexa. First I tried putting a teaspoon of the stuff in some tea. The effects were mild, yet suggestive of a great intensity, if that makes any sense. My body was tingling a lot, and I was laughing a lot, but at the same time, it was somewhat frightening. I put the stuff in a bag and forgot about it for a while. Then one day in 2003, I was visiting my parents, and everyone had gone to bed. I was bored out of my mind, which, in my opinion, after a lot of stupid experiences, is never a good reason to do serious drugs, and decided I was going to get fucked up. I ate about 4 tablespoons of the mixture and lied on my bed waiting for something to happen. I fell asleep, and woke up feeling horribly dehydrated. I went in the bathroom and was trying to drink water out of the faucet, desperately, but could barely get it down my throat because it kept closing. When my throat closed, I couldn't even breathe. There must have been 40-second intervals where I couldn't open my throat even to get a breath in, and thought I might suffocate. I kept trying to get myself to calm down and control my body, which is something I'm usually good at, but I could not get my throat to open properly. It was simply too dry. Trying to drink water made this even worse, but I thought that I might die if I didn't get some water in my system, so I kept choking and burping on the water for a long time until I managed to moisten my throat enough that I could drink. I downed as much water as I could. I remember the image of myself in the mirror being extremely bright and dangerous looking. And I was exhausted. I lied down on the bathroom floor and must have fallen asleep. At some point I must have gone back to my bed. I remember waking up multiple times, needing to drink more water, and having the throat closing problem again. Plus I could barely walk. And I felt like I was in the middle of an intense dream, but the main priority was to make sure I could breathe, and make sure I had enough water in my body. I kept trying to go into the bathroom, and I would try to take a step forward, and I'd fall to the side, then try to compensate and fall to the other side. I was knocking over furniture and falling all over the place, and making a lot of noise. The rest is a delirious blur. And my mom, who is pretty much against any kind of drug use, had to see me like that. Obviously I woke up my whole family knocking into bookshelves and bureaus and things. I remember slurring to them that I was just drunk and that I had drank way too much. The next day my dad told me he had never seen anyone so drunk in his life. And my mom told me I was sitting next to her on her bed for a while, silently. She kept asking me questions and I answered her logically and literally. Then I asked her where my bed was, and she told me, and I tried to get to it by going through the wall in the back of a closet. When I woke up the next day, sometime in the afternoon, I felt back to normal again, except that I still had to drink a lot of water, and my vision was blurry for at least another 24 hours. This didn't scare me much because I had read that Datura does that, and that it would wear off eventually.